Our topic this morning, how high do we aspire? It's a good one. And there are two stories that came to my mind as I thought about it. One deals with the beginning of what I want to say, and the other deals with the end. And so there we have it, two bookends. The first story has to do with a couple of parents who came to see me in my office at Living Wisdom School. And they were interested in having their child apply for kindergarten this coming year. So this was several months ago. Previous to their visit in my office, I had given, the staff had given an open house. And I always give a few introductory remarks before people go around to the classrooms and talk to the teacher. So this particular day, I opened the meeting with maybe 35 parents in the audience by saying to them, I know that your first priority is the happiness of your child. And then I went on to weave that into what it means to have a happy child and to learn. And that can happen actually at our school. And sometimes people are very surprised at that combination. So then these parents show up in my office, and they said to me that they had never thought in those terms before about their child. Now this was remarkable, really. Many, many parents who've been in my office say, I just want my child to be happy. But not these two. And they weren't thoughtless people. They were thoughtful people. But they had brought to bear on their parenting a different paradigm. And it's a paradigm that really is alive and well here in Silicon Valley. It's the paradigm of let's be the best we can be on this physical plane. And let's manipulate everything in creation to make these marvelous things that people can enjoy on this physical plane. And as we spoke, I became more and more impressed with their humility because they said they had talked for 4 days about my statement. 4 days. What did she mean? We haven't been worried about our child's happiness? What should we do? How will we change? And we can laugh, but they were sincere. And sincerity is everything. So that's one story. And then another story has also to do with school, because that's my life. And it happened years ago when we had the Joy-a-thon, and I was a fundraiser, and we were over at Shoreline Park. The children were biking and skating and doing a variety of things with sponsors who would pay for every basket they made, every mile they ran, and so forth. And it was a happy day. Parents were there, kids were just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And then all of a sudden, out of this happiness came this stroke of darkness. And a mother came to me. I had been slightly aware of her because she was looking for her child, but I assumed she'd found the child. But no, she hadn't. And she was in panic form. And she said to me, I don't know what to do. And she was really about to lose it. And I said, we'll find him. Now, there were children around, there were people on bikes, there were parents around. I said, you go down that path, you go down that path. What was he wearing? What does he look like? How old was he? This was not a child that was in our school. He was a very young sibling, and I didn't know him. So everybody went. And about 10 minutes passed, and I'm with the mother, and interiorly, I am praying to Master. I am saying, come into this situation, because we are doing everything we can, and we need your help. She, little by little, calmed down, the tears stopped, and then lo and behold, the police show up with the child and the bike. And yes, they were the park rangers. They had found him way past where he should have been. And he had just gotten carried away in the beauty of the moment. And so there he was. He was unscathed. He said, hi, Mommy. She was scarred for life. So that was over. And I was walking away from the whole situation, thanking God in my heart that it had a happy ending, when all of a sudden I was accosted by another of my school parents. And in with the best of intentions, she said to me, "Helen, you were much too calm in that situation." It is laughable, but it's also instructive. By her lexicon, in a situation where things don't go right, you get upset because that shows that you care, right? And she was interpreting my calmness as not caring. She wasn't privy to my interior conversation with God, which was, holy smoke. So there you have it. The parents who weren't quite sure what the whole point was, and the other parent who wasn't sure how you go about getting to your goal. So let's back up a bit. Some years ago, actually many years ago now, before I came on this path, I was really desperately praying to God to help me find a way, to bring him into the center of my life and still allow me to meet my responsibilities as a single parent and breadwinner. And things weren't going very well. So one day, I didn't have much money, so I frequented the used bookstores. And one day I went into a used bookstore, and there on the shelf amid all of these thousands of books was this one book. Now, my background has always been the Western religions, born a Catholic, raised a Catholic, very devout family. And I knew all about all the saints on the Western part of the world, and had read them and had cherished them, and had tried to model my life after them, been inspired by them. But I knew absolutely nothing about Eastern religions. It wasn't part of the curriculum at the college I went to. It is today, perhaps. At any rate, there's this book on the shelf, and I was drawn to it because the title was Men Who Have Walked with God by Sheldon Cheney. And I opened it to the table of contents and cast my eye down it, and I saw some familiar saints, but then I saw some that I didn't know anything about. And they were on the Christian side. But what really caught my eye was that he went back in history to what he thought of as the beginning of mysticism, to the Eastern tradition. And there was a whole chapter, or two or three, starting with Lao Tse. So I bought the book. And that book, I believe, was instrumental in allowing me to have the open-mindedness to consider this path. And let me tell you why. When we talk about Lao Tse, we're talking about like 600 BC. And we're talking about China. We're talking about a time that was turbulent. The feudal warlords were warring, which is what they did. It was also the time of Confucius. And these were two men, both in each in their own way, wanted to hearken back to the golden age of China. And that's where the similarity ended. Because in Lao Tse's mind, the golden age of China was a state of mind. It was a state where there was absolute freedom and oneness with nature and with God and with the divine. It was the river flowing through life, the esoteric river of the divine energy. And in Confucius's mind, the golden age was a time when the rulers were noble and just, and the subjects were law-abiding and loyal. And his idea was that in the golden age you had these codes and laws, and you had etiquette and conventions, and everybody was of a singular mind. Well, quite different. Now, Confucius and Lao Tse lived in different parts of China, and they never met one another until Lao Tse was in his 80s, Confucius was about 35, and Confucius had the idea, I should go talk to the great master. You know, he might be able to help me figure these things out, how to lead my life, how to help people lead their lives, because at that time he was a great teacher. And so he goes, and he shows up with his great retinue. And there's a lot of panoply and everything, and he begins to ask Lao Tse these serious questions about how to proceed as a teacher. And Lao Tse looks at him and he says, give off being proud, he said. Give up your desires, he said, and get rid of those people, the retinue. He said, you're too proud. And then he said, something that really hit to the heart of it. He said, I am afraid, my friend, that you may be about to mislead the hearts of men by mistaking what the true goal of life is. That you may violate the purity of the heart, which in repose is so still and so attuned with the divine that there is unimaginable, unfathomable freedom. And Confucius listened to this. He was respectful. And he understood that a whole vista had opened before him. But he could not fathom it. And he went away. And he became a great teacher of ethics. And he shifted the whole history of China into an arena where there was great attention to the conventions and etiquette and law and philosophy. Yes, but not to the mystical understanding and experience of the divine. Well, the story ends with Lao Tse, an old man, deciding that it's really time for him to leave town. And he was appointed the royal archivist by the ruler. This is a very prestigious position. So to leave, to turn your back on that was quite something. But he did. And as he gets, now we don't know whether this is myth or legend, but he gets to the gate, and I love it because there's truth in it. He gets to the gate and he's about to leave it all behind because the word had it that there was a realm somewhere to the west that still adhered to the values of the Golden Age and that was populated by wise men and untouched by death. Does that remind you of anybody? Babaji? I have to wonder. So he was on his way, and a guard, a very, very humble guard, stopped him and said, oh, let's say, you're going. But before you go, would you write down your wisdom? And he agreed. And so he stayed just long enough to write it. And so we have the Tao Te Ching, which is the way or the path of perfection. And there are fragments, some of it, but we have it. And off he went. Now, why do I tell this story? Because as I read the reading today, I understood that Jesus, when he was advocating against the Pharisees' point of view, was doing exactly to the Pharisees what Lao Tse had done to Confucius, and used different words. But it's the kind of thing where you have an experience or you have a teaching and time goes by and the purity erodes. And so it comes to the great avatars to come to us and to set it straight. What really is the meaning of life? For our parents, is it the happiness of their children or is it intellectual development? Well, from our point of view, it's a no-brainer. It's the happiness of the children. For Confucius, is it making sure that everybody follows the same etiquette and the code of law? Or, as Lao Tse said, is it that everybody lives from the heart so there is no reason for laws, for conventions? That you can be totally spontaneous because you're in the flow of the divine. It's both of those things. I was impressed when I read this reading, yet again, at how strongly Jesus comes across. Because we think of him as this loving, pure soul who says, suffer the little children to come unto me. When, in fact, he, when the time was appropriate, could come across like a sledgehammer. And he did. The Pharisees deserved it. You know, Moses had come 1,500 years before, and he had given the Ten Commandments to the Jews to bring them together. They were in disarray. They prayed. They had good hearts. They had sincere intentions, but they didn't know what to do. And Moses, the great avatar of the Jews, came in and brought what they needed to become one people under one God. And over 1,500 years, those great pure teachings had eroded to the point where when Jesus healed the leper on the Sabbath, they criticized him. And he said to them, man wasn't made for the Sabbath was made for man. And they criticized him when he talked to the divorced woman. And they criticized him when he allowed Mary Magdalene to wash his feet. None of this was by convention. And Confucius had his version of that. So where does that leave us? Well, we don't want to miss the point. It's that simple. We have these great teachings. We're on this fabulous path. And that book, by the way, for $5.95 was really worth it. We want instead to immerse ourselves, to open our hearts to that which is in front of us, and not be like Confucius, stand there saying, I'm not quite sure what he meant, and then going our way. But rather, cultivating the heart so it is in complete surrender to God. And what does that mean? Well, that means bringing God into everything, even when a child is lost and you're taking care of all the practical matters. It does mean giving out that call for help, that call for... And I look at that as I say it to you, and I think to myself, wow, we have a big assignment here. But we also have phenomenal models who can have divine involvement in the everyday unfoldment of life. No element of life is too small that we can't ask for God to come in, help us to move. All the saints, all that reading I did as a child, believe me, it has paid off beaucoup. I started in the 3rd grade with St. Rose of Lima because my teacher read the story to us. She didn't know what else to do with us, so she just read. She was young. They'd taken her out of the novitiate because they needed another teacher. She was 19. No training. Well, isn't that a great lesson, though? What does she do? She tries to teach. She does teach. I must have learned because here I am, and I can speak English. But she reads the life of St. Rose, and we would beg her, oh, Sister Ruth, keep going. And we were sincere because it was a riveting life. And when we finished that, she brought out another life. It was and I went to the library, and I looked at the library looking for somebody like St. Rose, and I discovered there's a whole section on the lives of the saints. And I went through it alphabetically, the whole thing. I had a great education in the lives of the saints because of that. And they have been my salvation because they are the voices in the back of my mind up until this path. I think it was because of the saints and my understanding and immersion in their lives that I came through relatively unscathed from my Catholic background. And I don't mean that irreverently because I really prize my Catholic background. I mean, it's very close to my heart. But what I do mean by that is that I was able, because of the lives and the inspirations of the saints, to tune into the devotional aspect, all that appealed to the heart. And I was able to kind of put in the background, I didn't necessarily not know about it, but all that stuff about, hell and damnation and mortal sin and venial sin and all of that. I mean, it's there. I'll never forget the time that Swami was writing Revelations of Christ, and I happened to be with him in India just for a few weeks and was supposed to be reading his edited remarks as he brought them down each morning. And I never could because, like Martha, I got sidetracked. Mary would have stayed, but Leela would say, Helen, come into the kitchen and help me. Or Nirmala would say, come and help me, Helen. It's Christmas. I have to wrap these gifts. And Swami would come in and he'd say, how much have you read? And I would say 15 pages. And he would just look at me. And then I finally sat down and I read it. And I came to that section where he talks about mortal sin. And he says so simply and so clearly, how can a finite cause have an infinite effect? And I said to him, Swamiji, do you have any idea what this is going to mean to millions of Catholics? And he looked at me, and it was a Catholic speaking to somebody who was so much more universal in his derivation. So yes, the lives of the saints and how they surrendered themselves to God, and from that surrender came this great wisdom about how to move through life. And we have that in front of us. But more than that, we have the teachings. We have Master, we have Swamiji, we have Jesus. And in this particular reading, it takes us back to the life of Jesus, where, in my mind, one of the premier points in the story of his last days was the Garden of Gethsemane. And he's praying to the Father, knowing that what awaits him is certain death, certain degradation, captivity. And he says, Father, let this cup pass from me. And then he pauses, and then he says, but only if it is thy will. And in that moment, he gave to us the model of how we can surrender to God and to whatever comes our way, because things come our way. Nobody is immune. And it is, well, it's not exactly like I would choose this if I had my choice. But here it is. And if it is your will, God, then help me to surrender to it. And in the Festival of Light, it says, with calm acceptance and joy. With calm acceptance and joy. And anything that comes to us, if we can meet it with that attitude of mind, with that frame of heart, then every single time it will be better. And I look to my own life, I look to the lives of the people I know, I see the challenges, I see the children in front of me, their families. There is so much pain and suffering and struggle out there. I mean, that is the name of the game, right? Not really, though. Not if you live as Lao Tse lived, which was in the purity of the heart, the freedom of the heart, that heart which allows us to fly high above anything on this plane that threatens to hold us back from our truest goal. Because Jesus was saying, be thou perfect as the Father is perfect. That's a novel thought to many, but not to us on this path, because Master and Swami have made it so clear that we have a divine origin and that our destiny is to merge back into it, into that perfection. And when we do, and when, not if, when we do, all will be Vasudev. All will be God.